Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing You Practice podcast, the podcast where I have the pleasure of simplifying the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. Today's episode, I've got a sneaking suspicion might ruffle some feathers. We're going to be talking about whether you should be adjusting on the first visit or not. Now, I have an opinion on this that's contrary to many. And I'm going to ask you to listen to this entire episode. I don't know, it'll be 20 or 30 minutes or so. And try not to defend your position until I've been able to kind of take you on a bit of a journey through all of this. I'm going to share my experiences with you, but my experiences are based on 8 years of testing, of trial, of thousands of case studies as well. Some of you might be surprised by the results, and others of you might think that this is just, of course, it works out that way too. So this is a question that comes up a lot in the group coaching work that we're doing in community influencer. So, should I be adjusting my patients on the first visit? Or alternatively, I hear chiropractors say, I never adjust on the first visit. And we often say this like a badge of honor as well. Now, I want to talk about first, as we're going through this session, we'll talk about reasons why people might adjust on the first visit, why people don't adjust on the first visit. I want to give you my definition of what a patient-centered care is. I'll share with you my journey with this over my 20 years of experience as well. So some of the reasons why people adjust on the first visit is they talk about it giving them valid information that will inform the care plan for the recommendations on the report of findings the next visit. So if I adjust somebody, I'm going to see how they respond, what happens, because we can get a lot of information from all of the history and the exam, but it's often, I know in my experience, it's often not until I go to adjust somebody that I really get the best information about how I think they'll respond. It helps the practice member as soon as possible, and that's a nice thing. They come into us with problems, whether it's a colicky baby or somebody that's having some form of musculoskeletal problem, and our heart and our compassion, our empathy wants to reach out and give them some relief as soon as possible. Another reason that people talk about adjusting on the first visit and why that's a good thing to do is it lets the practice member experience an adjustment prior to making a big decision at the report of findings. So just imagine for a moment that I had this amazing ice cream and I talked to you about how wonderful it tasted and all the beautiful natural ingredients inside of it, and also had some health benefits as well. And I wanted you to buy a 90-day supply of it. Yet I wouldn't let you taste it first. And each time you said, look, I want to taste it, I said, look, no, you can't taste it first. You need to buy a 90-day supply of it. You need to sort of pay in advance as well. We want to experience things, and there are benefits for experiencing things before having to commit to it as well. And so if somebody's had an adjustment, because a lot of people are really scared of adjustments. And if they get to experience it, and my experience is, I'm saying experience a lot here too, my experience is that most times when people have an adjustment, it feels really wonderful. And they start to get some form of relief after even the first adjustment as well. And so if they can experience it, then often that kind of helps them in the buying decision the next day as well. Now, for those that don't adjust, again, and I've not gone over every reason here, but these are the major ones here. For those that don't adjust, again, they share a number of reasons, but generally they're in kind of two categories here as well. Is that the patients won't understand the seriousness of care, of subluxation, and so we don't want to adjust them on the first visit. We want to build some form of anticipation. That's what we're trying to do. We're holding them back because we've got a big reveal on the report of findings. The second reason I hear all the time is, well, what will happen if the patient gets well after the first adjustment? Surely they'll disappear, and this will impact the likelihood of them signing on for a longer care plan. So let me give you my thoughts on this and a little bit of my journey. So in the first 10 or 12 years of my career as a chiropractor, I was very much in that second category. I rarely, if ever, adjusted somebody on the first visit. And if I'm clear and honest about why it was those two reasons there. I'd heard my chiropractic mentors tell me that we don't adjust on the first visit because, again, we need to lay down the seriousness of what we're dealing with, and people won't understand that if we give it to them too quickly. Or if the patient gets well, they'll just disappear as well. So I followed that advice blindly for 10 to 12 years. Then I started to run some experiments. I don't know why, but I just started to run some experiments where I started adjusting people on the first visit. And it was very interesting. Here's my thoughts on it. There's only one reason to adjust or not adjust on the first visit. And the only one logical reason, at least, is this, is do you have the clinical information that you need to adjust them effectively and safely? If you don't adjust them. And if you do, then adjust them. Now, it makes no difference, and I'm going to say this categorically here, to retention or conversion, whether you adjust somebody on the first visit or the second visit. And I have 8+ years of testing this and probably more than 2,000 case studies. So this is not just, and again, our retention in the practice and our conversion was very high. When I finished up in full-time practice there as well, our retention was just a little bit south of 150. So people came along, they liked what we did. Did everybody like it? Of course not. But lots of people did, and they chose to stay. And it made no difference, again, whether they adjusted them on the first visit or not. So valid reasons to not adjust somebody in my situation is if I took some x-rays and I wanted to review the x-rays, I wanted some time to thoroughly look at them beforehand. Maybe some scans I took and I wanted to look at those. There were times, even when I did an x-ray as well, where I needed some time to think about it. It's like, this is a complex case. I'm confused. I want to talk with some pals about this, maybe associates that I worked with, but I just got a gut feeling that now was not the time to adjust. I just needed to be. Now, for me, they were clinically relevant reasons, okay? So most of the time, the reason was simple, is there was something I was concerned about that I found on the examination and the history. I wanted to get an x-ray and I wanted to see that x-ray first. And so the numbers worked out with this that it was pretty close to 50-50, the people that would adjust or not adjust. When it comes to not adjusting people because I want to hold it back from them because I'm worried that if they get an adjustment, they won't come back and see me, or that I want to build the seriousness of it. These concepts here come pretty much under the umbrella of manipulation, okay? So choosing not to adjust somebody because they won't understand the seriousness of your care is, in my opinion, manipulation. Choosing to not adjust somebody because if they get well, they won't come back again is manipulation. And these are not good reasons to do it. They don't lay the foundations of trust. They don't lay the foundations of a long-term relationship. They don't lay the foundations of a patient-centered chiropractic practice that exists to change the health paradigm in their community. And I think when we do these things, we get off on the wrong foot with our patients, okay? These subtle forms of manipulation, and we do it with the best of intents. I understand why we do it, because we want people to understand the bigness and experience the bigness of chiropractic care. But there are several things that we do in the way that we practice that are subtle forms of manipulation that we just do because somebody told us that we had to do these things. And I'm here to tell you that you don't. I want to share with you a definition of patient-centered care. It's quite a long definition, but there are lots of elements in it that I think are really valuable. And there are lots of, because again, what often comes up is that we hear this space of, we don't want the inmates running the asylum. Like, if we let the patients do whatever they want to do, this is not the practice that we want to have. Patient-centered care doesn't mean that patients get what they want all of the time. This is a really important part of it too. But let me share a definition as well. Patient-centered care is a healthcare approach that emphasizes the importance of considering the patient's individual preferences, needs, and values. It ensures that the patient's values guide all clinical decisions. We have to remember this, okay? We have a vision for their health, but ultimately it's them that makes the decision, all right? So we need to keep their values at the front of our mind as well. It's a method where the patient is seen as a whole person rather than solely focusing on their illness or symptoms. We do that great as chiropractors. This approach advocates for partnerships between patients, their families, their healthcare professionals as well, okay? It's about education and support to help them make decisions and participate in their own care. Often, a lot of the subtle manipulations that we do is that we're removing decisions from our practice members. And when we remove the decisions from them and we make these choices for them, they can never fully participate in chiropractic. And if they can never fully participate in it, this is going to affect their ability, their longevity to want to stay around. It's going to affect their ability to want to refer their families and friends. So again, in patient-centered care, communication is open and honest and respectful. The healthcare provider, us in this situation, is offering care and care plans that are tailored to the individual's unique conditions, their preferences. The goal is to empower patients and to make them active participants in the healthcare journey. Now, I'm not sure it empowers a patient when we hold things back, when we withdraw from as well there too, okay? It's a move away from the one-size-fits-all, doctor knows best model, okay? It's collaborative, it's holistic, and it's customized, okay? So again, I want to clarify, a patient-centered approach doesn't mean that the practice member gets their own way. It doesn't mean that they're happy all of the time. Sometimes we have to give them news they don't want to hear. Sometimes we have to talk to them about their consequences, but it's keeping their best interests as well. So moving forwards, I want to talk with you about some of the conversations we need to have with patients if we're not going to adjust them, because there's a lot of people, a lot of you out there that would like to not be adjusting people on the first visit, but you're scared about what the patient will say if you don't adjust them right then and there. And then there's others of you that are worried that if I do adjust them on the first visit, then they won't understand the seriousness of what's going on. So I'm going to share with you some of the ways that we deal with both of those concerns as well. So I want to start with this. Dealing with those that you don't adjust on the first visit. Okay, how do we deal with that? So first of all, this needs to begin in many cases often on the new patient phone call. I certainly noticed in the last 5 or 6 years in practice that we would have patients calling up and they'd often ask a question, will I have an adjustment today? And then, we had a way that we answered this, and it was pretty much like this. The goal is to get started with your care as soon as possible. If Dr. Angus has all the information that he needs to adjust you today, then he'll definitely begin. And that was our truth. If I had everything that I needed, then I was absolutely going to adjust them. And the goal is to get started as soon as possible. Now, for most people, this was a sense of relief. Now, think of it. It doesn't necessarily, particularly if they've had previous chiropractic care, where they've had an adjustment every time they've gone in there, it doesn't make sense to not have one. And so this was our truth there again. So again, we would say something like this. If somebody asked, absolutely, the goal is to get started with your care as soon as possible. And if Dr. Angus has all the information he needs to adjust you today, he will definitely begin. Now, from a practical point of view, I talked about this before. This meant that about half the people, about 50% of people got adjusted as well. Now, from there as well, sometimes that conversation happened on the new patient telephone call. Sometimes it happened at the reception, the CA was saying as well. Once in the exam room, it's really important to telegraph that you might not be adjusting them as early in the appointment as possible. Problems come in when you've gone all the way through the history and the exam, and then you get to the end, the big reveal, and you say, we're not going to adjust you. This is where frustration often shows up with a patient. This is where there's that real disconnect. And so if things are heading like looking that direction, I want to say that as soon as possible. I often might start to, in the history, if I found out that there have been multiple car accidents or multiple trauma, or they're talking about signs that I'm going to stop there and say, look, I think we're going to need to get some x-rays with this as well. This is sounding a lot more serious than what I thought. And if this is the case, we'll find out a little bit more in the exam there too. It might not be safe for us to adjust you until we've seen those x-rays. And I'm going to just start to drop little seeds along the way there as well. So I'm going to begin to telegraph it. So it might be, something like this in the exam. Joan, I'm a little concerned about the swelling and the tenderness in the upper part of your neck here. I'm going to need some x-rays. To make sure that our adjustment is as safe and effective as possible, I'm going to need to really thoroughly review those x-rays before adjusting you. And unfortunately, this means that we're not going to begin with your adjustments today. So there'll be some version of that I will say through there. And again, this might be in the posture exam. It might be with the scans. It might be one of the orthopedic tests that I'm running, or this might happen in the, even in the history as well. Now, again, when I say this, it's okay for the patient to be frustrated. So they've come in wanting relief or to get started. They're excited as well. And so we have to be okay and hold a space for people to be frustrated. And sometimes, the practice member will reflect something back like this to me. But my previous chiropractor always adjusted me on those visits there too. And so I want to go, I hear your frustration, Joan. I want to get started as soon as possible as well. But I don't want to risk your health, and I don't want to risk my reputation as well. Based on what I've discovered today, it would be clinically irresponsible for me to adjust you without looking at those x-rays. And so in this situation, more than 99 out of 100 people are going to understand this. Does this mean they won't be frustrated? Absolutely not. They're going to be disappointed because they want to start there as well. So they'll be disappointed, they'll be frustrated, but they'll be okay. And again, let me touch on it again. Patient-centered care doesn't mean the patient always gets things their way. We need to be a source. We need to be confident enough. We need to hold a space for their frustration. And that's part of us being healthy, well individuals as well. Now, there has been, over my 25 plus year career and tens of thousands of new patients, there's probably been 3 to 5 cases at this stage where the person has been so cranky and so disappointed that they're not getting adjustment that I stop the visit at that stage. Again, I reflect back to them my concerns there too, and I'll let them know that it sounds like that I'm not the chiropractor for them. Let's stop the appointment here. I'm not going to charge you for my time. Let's move up to the front desk and let me see if I can find you a chiropractor who might be willing to adjust you without the x-rays. And there were a couple other docs in my town that I knew more routinely did this as well. But again, this is 3 to 5 people out of thousands. It's not something that you need to worry about. It doesn't happen. If you follow the steps that you're going through, if you're letting them know, and I'm going to talk about this adjusting on the first visit or going there too, if you're doing a good job of letting them know how the subluxation is impacting their health, if they get to see it, experience it, understand the seriousness of it, then most people in this situation are saying, I'm glad you're taking x-rays. I'm glad you're looking at those. This makes perfect sense for me, okay? So if we're not going to adjust them on the first visit, we want to telegraph that as soon as possible and give them really valid logical reasons. It's okay for the person to be frustrated. This doesn't mean they don't like you. This doesn't mean that that they just want an adjustment. Now, if you are going to adjust on the first visit, there's several things real key points that we need to achieve on the first visit in order for them to understand that today's adjustment is not about fixing the problem. The biggest thing that we need to do is let them understand the chronic nature of subluxation. And again, this is essential whether you're adjusting or not on the first visit as well. In last week's podcast, I introduced you to the layers of resistance, a change management guru, a guy by the name of Goldratt. And layer one was disagreement about the problem. And this is the chiropractor trying to solve a problem that the patient doesn't think that they have. They think that they hurt their back last week, and you think that you're dealing with a lifetime buildup of subluxation. And this disagreement or this disparity there is what causes all of the problems. Because they think the problem started last week, it's reasonable for them to assume that today's adjustment or maybe the next couple of adjustments is going to fix it as well. So the first thing you need to do on the initial consultation is start to make sure that you are both solving the same problem as well. And we do this through taking a thorough history, exploring deeper about prior episodes, histories of trauma, letting them know, because understanding what the latest research is showing, certainly around musculoskeletal issues and the presence of back pain. Most people have had several episodes before they've come in to see us, and they think that these have been several different episodes, but the research is showing now that these aren't several different episodes. It's the same episode that's happened, and it pops its head up. They become more frequent with time, they last longer, and they become more intense. We need to connect the dots for them between a lifetime of stress and what showed up last week. And this is easy to do through and starts with a history. And then we continue this through the examination. And the goal of the examination, one of the several goals, is to show them and let them experience what a lifetime of subluxation looks and feels like, okay? So posture and palpation and letting them feel that there are areas of tension in their body away from their primary symptoms, showing them what the fibrous and scar tissue looks like that goes along with chronic subluxation, showing them the functional, there you go, that was a bit of a slip of my tongue, showing them the functional issues, they can't move, things they can't do, letting them see the global impact of their posture as well. And then I want to be showing things in them, letting them know that, hey, listen, this fibrous tissue through here doesn't come in a week after an injury. This is a sign of chronic injury. It means it's been there years. These type of postural problems that you've got here have probably been going on for a long time. Like if you look back through old photographs, you'll probably notice this head tilt as well. So we want them to understand the chronic nature of subluxation. Now, again, this is really important. The goal here is not to scare them or to make stuff up. It's not to make them things worse than what they are. Just show them what's there. The truth is absolutely enough. And when we do this well, you're on the way to dissolving that first layer of resistance, okay? There becomes a natural agreement on the problem that you're both solving. Now, when you've done that, and even if you adjust them on that first visit, it's easier for them to understand that today's adjustment is not going to fix the problem. And I will often say to them something like this: the goal of today's adjustment is to begin the process. And my hope is it'll start to give you some relief. Maybe your bubble sleep a little bit easier tonight as well. I want to pre-frame that in tomorrow's appointment, we're going to talk in detail about what it's going to take to not only get rid of the presenting concern, the colic, the reflux, the back pain, the neck pain, but also to correct the underlying cause. Okay, now if we do that, that's enough. They then are excited to come into the visit the next day as well. And that's about it. It's no more complex than that. We look for these complex ways of solving very, very simple problems. Let's wind a whole bunch of this up now as well. Let's talk about my take on whether we adjust or don't adjust on the first visit. It really should be based on one logical thing, is clinically, do you have the information necessary that you can adjust somebody safely and effectively? And if you can, then go ahead and adjust them. It'll make no difference whatsoever to your retention and your conversion. And I have 8 years of data and thousands of case studies to back this up. Now, it does mean that we do have to make sure that we're ticking a couple of boxes, okay? That if we're going to adjust them on that initial consultation there too, they have to understand the chronic nature of subluxation. We do this through our history and through our examination. If we're not going to adjust them on that first visit, they still need to understand the chronic nature of subluxation, but we need to start to telegraph very early on that we might not be adjusting them. And this will prevent them from getting cranky. And in my experience is, most cases, the people will actually thank you for being thorough, because most chiropractors, Most doctors aren't thorough with the way that they go about this as well. We need to, as a profession, move heavily and quickly towards patient-centered focus. We need to make sure that we're putting the patient's desires first. Again, this doesn't mean they always get what they want. They need to understand the impact of subluxation, the seriousness and the consequences of subluxation, and this is very much outside their health paradigms. We need to let go of dogma, and we need to be coming back to logic. What logically makes sense? You need to be questioning the things like this podcast episode, for instance. When chiropractors are standing up on the stage and they're shouting and yelling that we, don't let the inmates run the asylum through there too. We don't want to be adjusting patients on their first visit because they won't get the bigness of it. And we cheer and yell along with this because we've drunk the Kool-Aid. And a lot of it just flat out doesn't make sense. Folks, that's my take on whether we should adjust or not adjust on the first visit. Until next time, thanks for all that you do. Keep saving lives. Your community so desperately needs you to be knowing and understanding all of this stuff. Till next time, see you soon, folks. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.